I used to work in a state institute for the developmentally disabled. We were temporarily relocated to another building for remodeling of our old building. Anyways, I was working one night, second shift. We had a locked Pika unit. I saw one of the residents walking down the hall. Very distinct gait and very distinct yellow t-shirt with a happy face on it. I went into the ward to let staff know that they had an escapee. This was a serious situation because this particular resident, Larry, would ingest absolutely anything, from clothing to pens to belts to a bird's head. Literally anything. He was also very reluctant to go back to his home ward, hence why I didn't bring him back myself. He needed 2 escorts. When we got back into the hall, less than 15 seconds later, Larry was gone. We searched the entire building, outside, downstairs, all wards. He was nowhere to be found. This whole search lasted less than 10 minutes because I had all extra staff looking for him. I was just about to call the house supervisor to let her know that we lost someone when, from out of the bathroom walks Larry with one of the staff. He had been getting his bath in the bathroom for the last 30 minutes or so. Kind of freaky. I absolutely, without a doubt, saw Larry in the hallway. I never would have short-staffed the wards like I did if I hadn't seen him. Like I said, very distinct gait, look, clothing. I took a lot of razzing that night. They all thought that I was crazy. Anyway, come to find out the next day, after the story goes around that I am crazy, Larry had an identical twin brother who died in that building 10 years previously.
I work in a 9-bed CCU that we night shift nurses swear is haunted. I personally have seen figures standing in doorways late at night. Blinds in patients' windows go up all by themselves. Call bells come on when the room is unoccupied. One night, another nurse and myself were giving a bath when the TV started flipping through all the channels. The remote for the TV was behind her on a stand. Another time, she was giving a bath all by herself to a sedated and restrained patient. She was down on her knees, tying his restraint, when she felt someone or something run their fingers through her hair. The patient was on 100 milligrams of diprivan, so it was not him, and there was not anyone else in the room with her. The scariest one is one night we admitted a patient into room 9. After we had gotten her into bed, she looked at the wall in front of her and asked what was on the wall. We looked, and here was a bright red blood running down the wall. Needless to say, we checked ourselves. The patient and the ER personnel had not left the floor, and no one had a fresh cut or open area on them. Well, the week before, a young lady had died in that room. She came in the hospital complaining about pain. She ended up having an upper endo and perforated something. She had projectile vomited blood all over the wall and floor. It was terrible. The nurses that were on shift that night said it looked like a slaughterhouse. I still get chills thinking about it.
Heard a story once about a 5th floor neuro unit. This was told to me first person. Nurse was at the desk, and a guy in a white nursing garb came through the double doors, walked into an empty room, and didn't come back out. Nurse thought it was weird, so he went into the room and it was empty. He went to the double doors and opened them, and there were 2 resp techs talking at the entrance who swore they'd been there talking the whole time and nobody came through the doors. When one of the co-workers returned from lunch and he explained what happened, she was like, "Oh, that's just Robert. He worked here as an LVN years ago and was accused of molesting a child. He was sure he was about to get arrested, so he jumped out the window in that room and killed himself. We see him all the time."
I was a new nurse at our hospital and had only been working there a couple of months. I brought a patient of mine up to surgery from the ER for an endoscopy, and they called me back down and asked me to bring her family up with her because she only spoke Italian and not enough English, and they needed someone to consent for the procedure. After dropping them off, I walked past the waiting room to head back down the hall to the elevators. I took the back way to get to the ER, and the hallways were all deserted. It used to be the pediatric wing of the hospital, but that is all shut down for the years, and the rooms are just empty and full of broken equipment and beds and crap. As I reached the old nurse's station at the T-junction between the pediatric hallway and the hallway that goes to the elevators, I saw a little girl standing across from the nurse's station farther down the hall. She had big pigtails, was wearing a brown dress, white shoes, and holding a teddy bear. I thought perhaps she was a family member who had walked away from the surgery waiting room. I was concerned that she would go into any of these rooms. She could get hurt or lost, so I said, "Hey, little girl, what are you doing? You don't need to be over there. You're gonna get hurt." And as I walked around the nurse's station to grab her hand and bring her back, I shit you not, she vanished. And I was about 15 feet away from her. Every hair on my body stood straight up, and I turned and ran like a bat out of hell down to the elevator. I pounded every button for what seemed like an eternity until the elevator got to the floor. As I got back to the ER, I walked up to the nurse's desk, white as a sheet. One of the older nurses looked at me and said, "Jesus Christ, what's wrong with you?" I remember babbling like an idiot as I tried to tell them what happened. After listening to me for a moment, two of the nurses said, "Uh-oh, you saw that little girl ghost? She's been around here for years." I remember saying, "Well, thanks for telling me about it before this." Apparently, the ghost had been seen down in the ER, ducking in and out of patient rooms and peeking around curtains. My wife worked up on the 7th floor, and she said that one time, on one of the nights, a whole row of patient rooms started yelling about this little girl that was running around in the rooms. I guess she gets around.
We had a black girl, about 10 in ICU, that was severely injured in a car accident, lots of brain damage. She didn't die there but was moved to another faculty after weeks and weeks. After that, I know of 3 older black males in their 50s that, if they were even mildly sedated, would ask about the little black girl with a ribbon in her hair who was sitting at the foot of their beds. One guy said, "She asked me how I was doing and then got up and walked that way." While he was pointing towards a 2nd floor window, he paused. A wide-eyed look came over his face. And then he said, "But I guess she really couldn't have left the room that way, huh?" Personally, I think she was taking care of her grandfatherly figures.
This one is pretty creepy and is one of the reasons I got out of the hospital and started working office case management. I worked many years on telly and I worked steady nights. I was constantly overtired, never felt quite rested. While waiting for my husband to get home, I was dozing on the couch. The kids were in bed. I was half in and out of consciousness when I felt a presence. Even though my eyes were closed, I felt the room turn red beyond my eyelids. I started to hear the whispers of 1,000 souls in the room. The air was oppressive, and I tried to scream, though no sound came out. The whispers got louder and louder, though I could not tell what the souls were trying to say. When my husband's key turned the door, the redness in the room vanished. The whispers instantly stopped, and I became wide awake, as though I was never asleep. I told my husband I felt it could be a bad night. Sure enough, in the room across the hall from the nurse's station, my coworker's patient strangled herself silently in her waist restraint. Her body was contorted, limbs contorted in unnatural ways, with her face smashed between the bed rail and the mattress. My coworker was distraught, having checked her only 20 minutes prior. We called a code and worked on her for a back-breaking 30 minutes. I did compressions, and I still remember the sound of a couple of her ribs cracking. In the end, she was gone, and my coworker was beside herself. The next night, the same scenario. I waited for my husband to come home. I drifted in and out of consciousness. The room turned red behind my eyelids, and I heard the souls whispering. but I was unable to figure out what they were saying. I opened my mouth to scream, nothing came out. I woke to the sound of the key in the door. That night I had agreed to switch sides with my coworker, having felt pity for her. The room across the hall was cleaned, and in it was a new patient, a man in his 50s with moving chest pain. I was tired from the night before, my back still sore from the 30 minutes of doing compressions. I worked swiftly as I could, getting in first rounds, checking frequently on my new friend across the hall with the moving chest pain. I was newly trained in telemetry and felt concerned about the pain that moved across his chest and down his left arm, then back up and down the right arm. Although I was new, I felt that I noted a subtle ST depression on his rhythm strip. But a more seasoned tele-nurse looked at the strip and said it was nothing. I called the cardiologist and thought I didn't want to seem overly zealous. I told him about the moving chest pain and what I felt was a subtle change in the ST segment. He ordered my patient Malix and Tylenol, which I gave. Then I was sidetracked by a patient whose rate suddenly went into the 150s. I got busy with his orders and for a moment forgot about my patient down the hall with the moving chest pain. Suddenly, the unit clerk shouted out to me in the still of the night down the hall, "Patty, go see your patient in 15. He's in VTech." As I raced to his room, she said, "No, now he's in VFib." I yelled over my shoulder, calling a code. I ran into his room. The hues changed from a soft yellow to a definite red. I looked at my patient as he sat up and lay down and up and down and up and down again and again, making these agonizing sounds. He could not sit still. In the midst of this, the code team came in. They all watched as this man sat up and lay down again and again. In awe, we watched as this man breathed his last earthly breath. As he lay down for the last time, they sprang into action, but too late. He died of a massive heart attack. A week later, I was applying to every insurance company in town. I got my steady daylight weekends and holidays off. I make sure I get 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. I vow never to work nights again. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed. I would like to give a special thank you to HorrorStudio1 who agreed to collab. I'm doing a live stream with him later on tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern time, I think it would be. So if you want to go to his channel, I'll put the link below. I suggest you subscribe to him. He's one of the reasons I started doing a horror channel. His videos are amazing. The way he narrates is amazing. Subscribe to him if you're not already. So I hope you guys enjoyed. A lot of you guys really enjoy the nurse stories, and I don't blame you. I really like them as well. So don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe. My last video will be on the top left. Next video will be at the bottom left. And remember, there's always someone or something watching you.